Welcome to Raising Unstoppable Teens. I'm your host, Dr. Kimberly Shear, teen breakthrough expert and founder of Academy for Independence. I am super excited about today's guest, who is Gail Weiner, and she will be talking with us today about dating and relationships. She is a licensed marriage family therapist and founder of Datewise. So I'm super excited to have her here. And before I read her bio, I would just like to say that today's episode is sponsored by Academy for Independence, where we provide one-to-one and group coaching to support teens in life skills and academics. And we also support parents as well. And I am giving away a free 30-minute breakthrough session. So if you'd like to schedule a session with me to talk about one of your teen's biggest challenges, just go to www.meetwithkimberlys.com and schedule your appointment. So back to Gail Weiner. Welcome. I'm delighted to have you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yes. So I'd like to read her bio. Again, as I mentioned, she is a licensed marriage family therapist and founder of Datewise, and she brings decades of clinical experience to helping individuals and couples thrive. Her unique approach trains women how to create lasting love, combining depth therapy with behavioral practices of coaching. Clients grasp their temperament and attachment needs and reshape childhood patterns to build satisfying intimacy. Gail's been interviewed on Voice America and numerous podcasts. She's a guest expert for First Date Stories, taught graduate level human sexuality courses, and speaks widely on relationship issues. Besides her private practice, Gail leads empowered dating events, a women's meetup, and will soon be beginning a Datewise group in August. Have you already begun that, or?
I have, but I think we're going to be opening it up again in September for people to join at that point if they didn't know about the August one.
Nice. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we get into the questions?
Sure. This was a follow-up of a in-depth training that I did with a group of women, because at the end of it, they said, this is great. Now we understand all the ideas, but how do you implement them on a date? If you're responding to somebody online, how do I suss out from the profiles if this man is the right kind of match for me based on temperament and attachment and imago and all the things they now understand to look for? How can you figure it out from a profile or from the first few dates? And so there's a lot of additional training that people wanted. And so it's very interactive. It's really fun, wonderful group of women, and they're getting the support they need to be really, really successful now that they're back engaged with the dating process.
Oh, I love that. That's exciting. So it's for women who have taken some coaching from you, and then this is kind of an extension to offer ongoing support and really help you with the application of what they've learned through the coaching and to be able to ask questions as they come up.
That's how it started. But now I see that we can add women who haven't already done that training, and it can be of use to them as well. And so my plan is to open it up in September to a broader audience.
Nice. Brilliant idea. So, okay, so you'll want to check that out. And we'll, at the end of the show, talk about Gail's contact information, and it will also all be in the show description as well. So, okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions. And my first question is, what were your teen years like?
Well, I think I was really lucky because I was a very emotional teenager. Most teenagers are, but I was super duper emotional. And that's a lot of up and downs, right? But I had a lot of things to ground me. And I was super involved in a youth movement that had sort of intellectual ideas involved and leadership roles involved, travel, artistic expression. So that was one piece. I was really involved in my drama group, and we had a fantastic drama teacher who changed my life. I did Israeli folk dance and also modern dance. And I feel like there's one more thing I'm not thinking of, but the main thing is I had groups of friends from different places who offered me different things and with whom I expressed different aspects of who I was. And I felt like I had lots of places where I could express myself and feel authentic and feel like I was on a path of growing and becoming more and more and discovering who I was. And that really grounded all the ups and downs of the feeling.
I love that. I'm also thinking too, with you being extra emotionally expressive, if you will, that that these different avenues were ways to kind of work through that or process through those things, which then helped you to kind of have, I love your word of grounding, but really have a better sense of, do you feel like it gave you a better sense of your self-identity and who you really are, and what you stand for, and some of those things, even if you don't have it all figured out? But do you feel like those things kind of helped you to figure you out more, I guess?
Absolutely. I mean, my father, I grew up with a super intellectual father and a mother who was frightened of a lot of things. And I remember there was this television documentary on the Northern Ireland conflict, the war. And I was devastated by it. And I remember sobbing in my room, and my father came in, and he wanted to comfort me, but all he could do was say, essentially, don't feel that.
Oh, yeah.
He had no idea what to do with all that emotion. And had it just been my parents, I think I would have felt that I was too much, or there was something wrong with me, or both. But because I had all these other places to be emotional and artistic and dramatic and thoughtful, I had lots of mirroring that said, actually, this is a strength. So finding these other communities who can reflect you more positively and more accurately is hugely important, especially when you have parents who don't quite get it.
This is true. And you have so much juicy information that I definitely want to get more into the dating questions. But I just want to say this as a side note for, those listeners that are parents of teens, how important it is to get the teens involved in something. I know we're in kind of the COVID and the school year starting up probably primarily will be online and that kind of thing. But it's still important for teens to have other groups or communities other than their school friends, because it's another place where they can have a sense of belonging, and it's also another place where they can shine, and their gifts, they can express different gifts and talents that you may not always be able to do, let's say in the classroom. And it really helps balance out when teens are feeling a bit outcasted or like they don't have as many friends. It balances out if some of their friends aren't your favorite people that they're hanging out with, but over here in the swim team is a great great group of kids. So they'll have exposure to that, and some of that will, I mean, we influence each other. So it's nice to have, friends in different, I'm going to call them communities,
Yeah.
to learn from. And also it helps us gives us a richness of experiences to learn other angles of ourselves, that we may not have been discovered, if we weren't in some of those clubs and stuff. So again, and just that sense of belonging. So if you don't belong over here, you have something else where you do feel like you belong and where you're uplifted, and that can be really helpful. So I just want to say that as a side note. But getting into the juicy stuff, because I know all of you want to hear about this. This is about dating and relationships. So I'm looking at my questions. Well, I think parents do have these two questions. I mean, one, often parents don't really like the person that they may that their teen is showing interest in. They may not. So that's one question, and maybe their daughter or son just admires and adores this person, but the parents feel like it's not such a good situation. So do you have? So that's one part, but I want to kind of mix that with handling how to strengthen a teen and handling the ups and downs of a relationship, as in the teen years. So what is your feedback on, or answers to both of those questions? How can you help parents with that?
Yeah, let me try to take it one at a time so I don't overwhelm myself. I think there are a lot of things we can criticize about our kids' choices or our friends' choices, even in a partner. And, it's a broad spectrum from, well, I don't really think they bring out the best in my child, to, oh my God, they're injecting drugs, right? And everything in between. So, of course, you have to do your best to assess, is this actually dangerous for my child, or is it not my first choice? And that's a really big difference. And I think to the degree that it's not your first choice, maintaining open, non-judgmental communication with your child, so they know they can come to you if they have issues or problems. Because of course, everyone knows the more heavy-handed you are and judgmental about their choice, the more attached to that choice they will be. You want them to feel that they have the room to consider, is this good for them? What are the problems? Do you have any ideas about that? I think that deepening your family values in the teen years is very challenging, because the natural tendency is for them to be separating themselves from you. But if there are ways to maintain activities that reinforce the values you want for your child, whether that's in your religious communities or your activities that you do as a family or the ways that you talk together, that is again, a ballast for the ways they might be being drawn out of their core values. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I did have kind of a side question with, I loved what you said, definitely non-judgmental and really listening. If it's that your teen is with somebody that's not your first choice. I love that. And separating that from it being a safety issue, obviously, that's a whole different, how you would handle that is differently. is different. But with the person that's not your first choice. So what I heard is that how parents can do that is not going in there and kind of, even if you are non-judgmental, but kind of saying a list of what you see, things that you disagree with, or, your opinion, which is basically judgment, but still. So what I heard in your answer is not to kind of tackle it that way, but instead ask your teen questions without judgment, so they feel open and they can trust you, and get them to think about some of the consequences or some of the behaviors of this person, and the influence and so forth. So it's really kind of you're guiding them with your questions to think about different possibilities, I guess, with this person. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Or?
And I think the starting place is, tell me what you love about them.
Mm-hmm.
Enter into their perspective so that you can build from there.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have a chance down the road to say, well, what's it like for you when he blah, blah, blah?
Mm-hmm.
Assuming you get the privilege of them confessing to you what's happening. What's that like for you?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think would help you? How could you deal with that? How are you thinking of dealing with that?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think your options are? Because part of it is, right, you want to help them be stronger because they're facing certain kinds of challenges in a certain way for the first time.
Right.
In a serious romantic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so what can they learn about themselves through this? What can they work on so they can feel more confident because of X, Y, or Z challenge?
Mm-hmm.
So helping them see it as an opportunity to grow, and have an opportunity to say, well, whatever happens to this relationship, I'm going to be my best friend in this situation. What does that look like? What does that look like?
I love that. I think that's huge. What does it look like for me to be my best friend in this relationship? Very empowering. Well, you kind of tapped in it, but we're going to see if you can expand on it a little bit. But how do you use the relationship to grow in your sense of self, as opposed to submerging it?
Yeah. You could tell me from your experience working with teens how much this is the case and how much is different for teenage girls versus teenage boys. I'm not sure for this current generation how that breaks down by gender, but certainly with the women that I work with around dating and relationships, and as I was coming up, a big issue for women was to be pleasing to a man and to identify part of her success as a woman with being in a romantic relationship, later, turning into marriage and whatever. And so the idea that would be more important than actually how happy are you in this relationship is a big issue, because you have to be, I think, willing to consider always that if you're not getting your needs met in this relationship, you can try, you can gain skill, you can see how much the other person can respond if you speak calmly, if you're clear about what you need, if you ask for it in a way that gives them the maximum opportunity to say yes, right? Rather than attacking or blaming, you're calm, you're clear, and you give them space to come toward you in their response. As you learn that skill, you get to see more clearly the snapshot of who this other person really is. And so you get better at communicating, and you see, well, can they step up to the plate or not? And if you find over and over again that the answer is not, then I think you've become stronger in the process of getting that answer. And in your next relationship, you will be better doing that from the very, very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So that you don't invest your heart, 50 leagues ahead of what you understand about who they are.
Right.
And skillful communication, to me, is the way that you keep those things more at the same speed. Your understanding of who the person is and your feelings about who the person is. Because
Yeah.
feelings very often outpace understanding.
Especially in those of us that are emotionally expressive.
Yeah.
So I loved your answer. It brings even clarity to me. Communication is always, there's so many factors to it that I think the best we can do is always aspire to be better communicators and listeners, because that's part of the communication process, of course. But I love that. I love that you say, really being able to communicate your needs. And that's an area, well, two things. So my thoughts are going a little faster than I can speak. So I apologize, but hopefully I remember. But with a lot of teens, it's, you bring up the women, that you coach and stuff, and some of the and the communication. But I know with a lot of my male teens, they just due to conditioning, they aren't tapped into so much their feelings, as as a therapist. I'm sure you've seen this, and so it's sometimes hard to even identify what they're feeling other than anger, and then also how to underline that, what is their need, what do they need. So being able to tap into that, and that's also a skill, but it is critical. I love that, because that is what you, in any relationship, even teacher student relationship, and you want to advocate for yourself, you kind of need to touch into what it is that you need, and what it is that you're trying to convey. And then the other piece is, kind of reminds me at the beginning when you were talking about the values, and families kind of doing activities to role model some of the family values. I think a really great question to ask teens, and I know I do this, ask them to kind of really reflect on what are their values, which may be different than their parents, and those values may change.
Yeah.
But it's also a good starting point when you're in relationship, because some of those will be your deal breakers, and some of them are your values in the moment. But those, if you hang on to those and you know where you stand in that, it can help when you're in a relationship. And if you're with somebody who doesn't value the same things, it can really tear you down, or trying to identify that in the beginning before, as you say, your heart's in it, 50 leaps ahead, kind of even looking at values. And if they're not aligned with what the other person values, maybe be their friend, but look elsewhere for a more romantic relationship with someone. So
Right.
Okay. Okay, so we kind of talked about advocating. I'm trying to think about, so I'm going to ask this. It touches upon a little bit about what you've said, but many of us, we do like to be liked. And sometimes we may not set our boundaries, or we may not adhere to what we value, because we're kind of you know, in a dreamy state with this person, and kind of have this idea of what we want this person to be. And we want to be liked and possibly loved by this person. So how it where's the line with that, wanting to be liked, and then you've got where you want to set your boundaries? And oftentimes, many of us don't set the boundaries because we're scared that if we do, we're going to lose the very thing that we want to keep, right? So yeah, I'll leave it at that for right now, and then I have a sub question on that one. So just, like what are some tips for, for adults and teens to have them feel maybe more confident in setting boundaries in a relationship? So even if they're feeling pressured to be liked and loved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to back us up, because I think that end point of feeling really secure and confident in yourself is the thing that allows you to stay authentic, whoever the other person is. And so you might feel very drawn to someone. The test is, when you're being your authentic, full, expressed self, can they appreciate and receive and glory in who you are? And so it's like the preliminary question for me is, how do you get to that state of self-knowledge and self-love that you can show up anywhere with anyone fully as you? And so then we're talking about, what are the activities that develop you as a person and give you a sense of what's beautiful and unique about you, your one expression in this lifetime, right? And so again, for teens or for grown-up people, being really engaged in your own life, in the things that use and develop your unique perspective and skills and contributions to the world. And when you're in that flow and you have that kind of energy, and you have the social contacts and communities that are part of that self-expression, you have a date with a new guy who you think, I'm taking the woman's point of view and I'm assuming heterosexual, but a new person. You have a date with a new person. You love yourself, and yeah, they're really attractive, but the question is, can they love you as much as you love you, or close? And then it's a whole different kind of calculus, I think. But it starts before that moment of, resist giving up yourself, because yourself is already so in play in all the other places in your life that the approval of this particular person becomes much, much, much less important.
Right. And I think we're also more attractive when we are passionately, joyfully, going about doing our thing, things we believe in, being who we are with our story and our warts and all, so to speak. That's very attractive. As well, as opposed to kind of looking a little bit more needy or putting ourselves to the side, because I'm sure most of us have heard, if you want respect yourself. You want love, it begins with loving yourself. And I really do think that that's a truth. So if you're radiating that, other people will also respect you. Other people will also be attracted to you because you're enjoying what you're doing. And if they're not, that's kind of a sign, right? Or if
not the right person for you, they're not the right person for you.
Yeah, because then it can, if you continue and kind of force that relationship, I think sometimes the other person can start tearing you down to try to change you to not be your authentic self.
You've already preemptively given up part of yourself
Yeah.
in order to try to make a bond. So you're already entering the relationship with less power than you actually have. And yes, it disintegrates from there, typically. You have to sort of claw your way back to yourself.
That's a good visual. Claw your way out. So very, very well stated as well. Well, talk a little bit. Well, what about, I know with teens especially, and I don't, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but what about with the sex and all of that and how that enters into relationships, or even for adult women feeling pressured or feeling pressured maybe could be one way to describe it. And then it could get worse to where you're really not into it yet, or you want to wait, and they're just not listening to you. Might even be trying to physically put you in compromising positions, I guess, that are uncomfortable for you. So how would you, what would you say to that? I guess just that would be helpful. I mean, like, I even know, like with teens or, kind of love and sex can be confused. And there can be pressure, to have sex when you're not ready. So, so I don't know if you can give any, even a mindset, something that could be helpful.
Yeah. Sometimes people will want to have sex because they feel it's time. They haven't had sex yet. And they say, well, this person seems okay enough. And I want to have this experience because it's part of my growing up. And so, make sure you know them well enough that you trust their character. Make sure you don't get pregnant when you don't want to, and do whatever it takes to make sure that doesn't happen. And keep yourself safe. Then there's the question of you're inside of a relationship, and there's been some sexual contact, but you haven't sort of gone all the way yet. I think, and let's say, the typical situation is the boy is putting more pressure on the girl, although I suppose it can happen the other way too. I think that this is another instance for practicing advocating for yourself and saying, for example, is it more important for you to have sex, or is it more important for you to feel like both of us really feel good about it? Do you want to have sex with me and have me feel bad about it afterwards? How would that be for you? This may be a conversation that ends up ending the relationship, but if his answers are essentially, you get the feeling that he doesn't care how you feel about it, you may decide to reconsider the relationship, because every conflict, whether it's about sex or how much money you spend or where you go on vacation or whatever the versions are for teenagers, right? Every conflict is an opportunity to communicate more clearly and to find out, how does this person who I'm with think about things? And are we in enough alignment, or can we get in enough alignment that both of us feel good about the decision that we make together going forward? But the thing about experiencing yourself as absolutely an equal partner in the decision making doesn't mean you get your way every time, doesn't mean he gets his way every time. Sometimes it's compromise, sometimes you take turns. But when it's important things like, are we going to have a baby or not? Are we going to have sex now for the first time or not? that absolutely has to be a mutual decision. And if you're
Mhm.
with someone who can't make a mutual decision with you about something that important, I think that, to my mind, is a moment to step back and reconsider, what is this relationship about?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's can be uncomfortable to even really talk about it, to talk about sex, to talk about, your feelings around it in a relationship as a teen, and or it can be uncomfortable parents talking to their middle schooler. Or that was one question I had for you as well. What age do you think is appropriate to talk, to just kind of start the conversation on sex or body development, kind of human sexuality, or in relationships, or the stages, I guess.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think you set the stage again from the time your child is little in terms of their physical boundaries, other people's physical boundaries. How is it okay and not okay to touch people, like pushing and throwing sand in their eyes and blah, 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 right? You're helping your child develop empathy for the other person's physical experience from the very beginning of raising them, right? On
Right.
the playground and with their friendships and fights and however it happens. You know, is there a magic age? I think, for example, I started talking to my son about this when he was 8 or 9, maybe, just about, here's how babies are made. And then the sophistication of the conversation develops as their own minds develop and emotional capacity. And so, yeah, their first crushes and boys and girls kissing at the dance or afterwards. And um, I think there is something about helping them pay attention to how the other person is responding. So
Mhm.
this idea of consent, this idea
Yes.
of both people indicating yes to
Mhm.
whatever it is that's happening between them is a
Mhm.
kind of sensitivity that you want to be developing all the way along. So then when you bring it up in terms of sexuality, it's just an extension of the conversation that's happened their entire lives.
Mhm. Love that. That was really great advice. Um, yeah, I like the whole mutual consent. It's interesting because my daughter and I were just having this conversation, really not about sex or conditioning or any of that. It had to do with kind of a joke about her dog. Um, anyway, but she was going to name it after, get that. Is it Pepe Le Pew, the
Uh-huh.
skunk? And the skunk loved the cat, I think, and the cat didn't want anything to do with Pepe. But as we were talking, because we were talking about it with her about her dog, something similar, and we talk about, we kind of realized, look at that conditioning. Now that's a very old cartoon, but there's the female cat that's really saying no, and Pepe is not listening and still, is trying all these ways to, you know, get her to love him, but it's interesting. This made me think about how on autopilot some of the conditioning is. So when you talk about just the empathy and just these growing pains and just growing up, and the family and having communication, all of that role modeling, that's helping to condition your son or daughter, to have better communication, to feel okay about sex and relationships, and to have the empathy, and perhaps reflect and so forth. So it's you know it's really, really important. The role modeling is just such a, that really sticks. So yeah. Yeah. So I love the mutual consent though, because that's really important. And I heard a friend of mine say something that she's teaching her daughter, who's like 4 or 5 now. I think there might even be a book on it, but it's My Body, My Choice.
Yes.
And I really like that. That's just a simple little automatic thought you can have in your head. My body, my choice. Do not feel shame or wrong for what your values are, even if it's abstinence. Whatever it is for you, that you are not wrong, and not to feel shame. And when you're aligned with where you stand, that's an empowered place. And like what you said, that you start attracting other people who can really appreciate that about you. So I just want to say that as well. But
I think physical activity, being involved in sports, being involved in using your body in ways where you're in control of your body is super strengthening to this experience of having a right to your own body.
Yeah. Very true. Very good point. So, well, I'm super excited. I want to thank you for being a guest, and you just was a joy and so informative, and really, I felt like really great suggestions, insights, perspectives, tips that and practical. Like I feel like our listeners can take these golden nuggets and really apply them immediately in their own lives, or start thinking about them and how it applies to them. So I want to thank you for that. And you have a delightful offer for our listeners. And that is a free 1-hour coaching session, which is normally valued at $195. So she's giving this away to our listeners for free. And do you want to expand on that? Like, you also have some other things that they can use that hour for as well. So I'm going to let you take it from here.
Sure. Yeah. So the big offer is this hour is for anything you choose to focus on, any in particular challenge that a trained psychotherapist might be able to help you with. But I also am a certified writing teacher. I love to help people with their writing, in particular with their online dating profiles. So if you've been thinking about getting online to date but haven't yet, we can spend and want to spend the hour this way. We can focus on me guiding you into how to approach your profile, what to make sure to include, etc. Or if you already have a profile out there and you want to make it more powerful and more compelling and more targeted to the right kind of match for you, then we can work on editing your current profile in that hour. So, coaching on any issue, or focusing on your profile, whether you have one now or want to improve the one you have.
Wow. And that's a generous offer. So I want to thank you again, and really encourage everyone who's listening to take advantage of this. That's an hour of coaching from a licensed therapist on anything, or writing and helping improve your profile so it really pops and you stand out and attracting the man or woman of your dreams. So I don't know, pretty cool. So how can they, I will post all of this in the description and as well. So if you don't catch it, if anyone's listening to it right now, I guess anyway, we'll have it in the description. But how can people, where should people go to schedule that free coaching session with you?
Just write me directly, datewise@icloud.com, and mention that you're from Kimberly's show, that you found out about it through Kimberly's show, and I will honor that promise of your free consult for an hour. Datewise@icloud.com. Just email me and request the consult.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you again so very much, Gail, for being a guest on the show. And just again, I just a wealth of wisdom. So yeah, so
My pleasure. It was really fun. Thank you.
yay. So we will have a new super guest next week, next Tuesday on Voice America. So you'll want to be aware of that show as well. And so have a beautiful week, everyone.